Hello. Hello, everybody. Getting situated here. Welcome to another Friday live stream. I am so excited to talk about today's Aries new moon that we're going to go over. This is the second Aries new moon of 2023. And if you've been around the channel, you know that this is the third live stream in a row where we've really been diving deep into this double activation of our Aries energy. And today will be no different. So we're going to keep on going with Aries and what does this actually look like? So to start us off here, and because I really need to talk about this myself, I process best when I talk out loud or when I think out loud. So I wanted to share my own experience of how the first Aries new moon played out for me. And I do that in one, like I said, I can definitely get some processing in here while we're hanging out. And two, even though I'm telling my story, I really genuinely think that you could put yourself in my story and see, like, how does this translate into your own life? Are there any themes that are the same? And so to tell this story, I kind of got to back up a little bit to March 13th, which at this point, that was like 2.5 weeks ago, almost 3 weeks ago. That was right after the first few banks failed. So that was the Monday after the US Fed took control of two different banks the day before. And I have to tell you first this part of it, because this is what launched the rocket that even set everything else in motion. As I was watching that coverage of what was going on with the banks and knowing what I know astrologically speaking, that Pluto is like kind of wrapping up one of its stints in Capricorn. We're going to get a little Pluto in Aquarius and then it's going to go back. And so I'm just like kind of seeing this future of like, here we go again, right? Pluto and Capricorn started with banks collapsing in 2008. And here we are trying to make this transition into Pluto and Aquarius out of Capricorn. And we're having banks crashing again. So is it just isolated or is this the beginning of something? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. But what downloaded for me on Monday, March 13th was I am done living on credit. I'm done. I do not want a single debt on me at all. Like that's just what landed for me. And when I say it landed, like it turned me on so much. I was so excited about this idea of having no debt. Like I had never even really like thought about it before, and since then I've watched a couple things on debt-free living, and it talks about like how normal it really is, like especially in America, that like of course you have a mortgage, of course you have like a credit card bill, of course you have like of course you have debt. Like why wouldn't you? Like why wouldn't you just use the debt? And I'm right there with you. Like I've been kind of in that mode of like this era of cheap money that we've been living in. I had some debt racked up. I have a mortgage still. I have a credit card balance sitting there. And then I'm watching all of this like, financial instability, and it just really came over me. That's enough debt. I'm ready to be done. I'm ready to pay it off and just completely close out of that part of my life where I had debt. Like, let's just see what would that look like to like bring it to an end. And so the first thing I realized is that I'm kind of deep. I'm kind of deep in it. And this ain't going to get fixed overnight. Like, there's going to be a minute of like getting out of the debt. And like, that's okay. That's okay, right? Like 1 degree turns, baby. Like, let's just go in the right direction. Let's just a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit. What does that look like? What's my 1 degree turn today? I cut my credit card in half. March 13th. I cut it in half. I threw it away. I took anything that was like getting charged on my credit card, like as a monthly recurring payment, and I moved it onto my debit card so that theoretically the balance at least shouldn't be going up. And then I'll pay it off as fast as I can. Um, so this whole concept of like, I don't want to be in debt. Like there's just like this heartbeat inside of me of like debt free, debt free, debt free, debt free of like that's where I need to get to. So I don't again, I'm not saying this is right or wrong for anybody else, but this is what led me to this space then when we had the first Aries new moon on March 21st. That happened at, like, 0 degrees of Aries, and March 21st was just a couple days before March 23rd when Pluto stepped into Aquarius for the first time in, like, 2.5 centuries. So that week which was just last week, which feels like a whole lifetime ago, like, that week was intense for me personally, and I would love to hear from you, like, how was that? Like, that Aries new moon, March 21st, Pluto stepping into Aquarius just 2 days later, so then you have Pluto at 0 degrees and the Sun at kinda, like, 2 degrees, and making a very, it was intense. That's how it felt for me. How was it for you? Um, March 23rd was really when this whole thing, like, kicked into high gear, and so that's why I bring in the Pluto moved into Aquarius that day. PS, before I continue, if you like what I'm doing here, give it a thumbs up. That really helps, like, push it out into the algorithm. Thank you so much. March 23rd, picking back up in the story, it was a Friday. It was just this past Friday, like a week ago. And I had a meeting on a project that I have been working on since September. So about six months now. I've been working with these people on this project, and we've been working through the steps of where they were on the project and moving them forward. And basically, I had been working with them to build their business plan, to like help them write their business plan, help them figure out like enough detail to be able to write this business plan so that they can do a lot of fundraising and like start getting the money for their project. The whole time, they were very clear with me that they would prefer that I would also then serve as the project manager. So, like, help write the business plan and then just lead the project, like build the store. And even though that would have been or would be my third grocery store that I have opened, so like I've done it a couple times before, that wasn't so much a hang up. It wasn't like I couldn't do it, but there was this subtle thing these whole last 6 months. There was this subtle block inside of me. And I really draw this out because this is that block went away. It just and Pluto and Aquarius and the block went away and it was just like a whole new world opened up that day. Very Aries energy too, like just a couple days after the Aries new moon there. But this block that I've had inside me these last 6 months basically said like it's not worth it. Like, yes, I could do it, but there's no way that they're gonna be able to afford me. Like, there's no way they're gonna want to pay as much as what I feel like I would need to charge in order to make this worth it for me. Like, it's like a 2-year project minimum. So, like, devoting 2 years of your life to something, full-time effort, do you wanna do that or not? And my answer has been no. For 6 months, I don't want that. I don't wanna sign up for that because I know that I'd have to settle for less value than what I really would want to receive. And the piece that flipped on March 23rd when Pluto stepped into Aquarius, this little question came. And that's often I think how these like whole new world openings show up in our lives. It's like this little question. And it asked me, it like leaned in real close and it was like, who does it hurt for you to tell them your price? What about that? What about what about if you just quoted them the price? And then maybe they say no. Maybe they say exactly what you've been thinking these last 6 months, like, "There's no way they're gonna pay that." They laugh at you, they call you crazy, like, whatever. What if you gave them your price? And that had literally not occurred to me, like, on a conscious level, like, Nope. I had just already come to the conclusion that there's no way they're gonna pay it, so I'm not gonna quote it, and I'm gonna, like, really dive into this because this is the part where I'm like, "Where are you doing this in your life? Where else am I doing this in my life?" I'm searching because they they won't accept me being that big, so I'll just stay small and skip the expansion. Like, that's basically what I was doing, and I didn't realize that that's what I was doing, but after I realized that, like, what's the like, the harm in quoting them a price? And so I start working on, like, what would my price be? And I realized, like, I never even came up with what I thought my price would be, right? Like, I just said it's too high. This is one of those places where, like, the ego can be really subtle and can use tricks like this to keep us small. It can say, they're not going to accept it, so why even give it? And it's like, that might sound like me knowing my value, but looking back at it now, it was my ego protecting me from being rejected. So, basically, like, what opened up with Pluto and Aquarius for me was I don't care if they reject me. Like, how freaking cool to get to even think through 2 years worth of effort and how much time do I really think it would take? How much energy, which is to say, like, how much time is this gonna take? And let me quote based on this is what I would have to give, like the scales where we were talking last time with the Libra full moon. It's like the scales, in order for them to balance, it has to balance on both sides. And so let me figure out like how many hours, this is the energy that I'm going to have to put into the project in order for there to be a store in 2 years. And to make that balance, to make it match to where it's like, yep, nope, those are the same. That's going to be a chunk of change that will be the same amount of energy. It will be reciprocal to the amount of my life force energy that I would put into this project. And so, actually taking the time to go through how much energy are we talking about here because I know I can do it. Like, that really was so funny. This is again where the ego is insidious because in the top of my mind, it's like, I'm not worried at all that I can do it. Like, I'm totally fine. Like, I know I could deliver. They just won't pay me what I'm worth. So I'm not going to engage. I'm just not going to go there. I roll my eyes at my own self and my own ego, and that's harsh. And yeah, yeah. Bless her, bless the ego part of me who really is trying to protect me because here, as I have worked through how much energy is it going to cost me? So, how much money is it going to cost them in order for us to come together and like find this balance point? As I go through that, I realized like my initial valuing of myself was like, basically, I got to the end of, like, making the first draft of my quote. So, like, I found the number of hours and I applied, like, a rate, a dollars per hour or whatever to the number of hours to, like, kind of find what that added up to and, like, kind of this first draft of how much money has to sit on this side in order for it to balance with the effort. And the number I came up with, I had that reaction like, "See, that's just not even worth it." That's just not even worth it. Like, this is a lot, and that's just not even worth it. And I still, at that moment, was projecting it back onto them, like, see, it's not even worth it. And then it opened up, like, for real and was like, so then don't you think you should raise the rate? Like, so if that amount of money's not worth it, then how much would make it worth it? Like, if that pile is like, basically, it's like this, like the effort is so much heavier than what this is, then isn't that to ask for more? Isn't that to, like, raise the stakes of what goes on this side? Like, my quote was low. I wasn't excuse me, I wasn't valuing myself in a way that was fair to me. Like, when I saw that first number, the very first quote that I drafted, like, it was like this, and I took one look at it and like, "Yeah, I'm not doing that. There's no way I'm doing all this for that. Like, that's just not even worth it. And so to balance those out, it took me 5 days. That was Friday night that this whole thing opened of like, what if what if you told him your price? What if you let them reject you? Basically, what's the question of like this little angel that's like, hey, hey, do you think you could stand it for them to reject you? Because if you could tolerate being a little bit rejected, maybe you're also opening yourself up to this like slim chance that they could say yes. They could say yes. So price the thing like you would want them to say yes, right? Like price it like this is a good deal for you. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like again, I never even thought about that. I never even like, I was so like we talked about in the Libra full moon episode, like I was so looking at the other and like what was fair for the other. And like basically this rate on my first quote, like that was reasonable for them to think that they would probably pay that rate. And so I did the math like based on what was reasonable for them. And I'm like, yeah, this isn't worth it. This sucks. This is like, I'm doing like 2 years worth of hard labor and I walk away with that. No, no, thank you. I'll skip it and I'll be better off. Thanks a lot. And so, okay, so, at what price would you be excited for them to say yes? For them to bring you onto the team and, like, start paying you and let you run and, like, build the thing? Like, what happened on Friday when Pluto entered Aquarius, like, what actually happened, the physical, this is why I love telling the real story because we can theorize about energies all day long, but here's what actually happened. I got to go to my first meeting with their architect. So, like, the person who's designing the building and that will help us, like, write up the bid package that will go out to general contractors so that we can get bids on who's gonna build the building. So, it's like a ground up project of building the building and then putting a grocery store in it after it's built. And I got to meet the architect, and we sat there for 2.5 hours getting to understand how is the architect going to do his part? Like, how does it get handed off to the engineers? How does it? I got to learn like 7 new vocab words. I took so many notes. I went home and for like 5 hours after that 2.5 hour meeting, I just was like lost in thought about how fun this project could be, right? Like, I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know exactly, but like, I have never done a big construction project like that before. So, like, I was like attracted to the prospect of like getting to do the work because I can see what it will be like to work one on one with the architect and like he's managing the construction side and I would manage everything else. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that would be so fun. And then here comes the little angel, like, so what if you gave him a price? And then I find that here's the price they would probably want to pay, and this isn't worth it. So the price needs to be different. The price needs to be a little bit heavier so that it can feel worth it to me in order to make that win-win scenario where they get to win, they get a store, I get to win, I get to walk away with my own living benefit. Like, and that's where it really does come full circle with where I started with launching that rocket of desire, this like fun mission of paying off all my debt. Like, that was the funnest thing I could think to do. The idea occurred to me like, well, if I worked for 2 years and got to walk away debt free at the end of it, now we'd really be talking about something. Now we'd really be like, oh, 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 yeah, yeah, I'd do that. If they wanted to pay me this, which gives me my own living benefit of being able to change my life, yeah, yeah, I'd sign on to that in a heartbeat. And so it took 5 days to get to that price and then be able to like embody it, to challenge all of my own scarcity programming around the absurdity of the number that I was asking for, and to accept that not only am I worth it, but way more importantly, the work is worth it. Like that was another piece that happened like on Saturday, on day 2 of like kind of putting this all together because I just like I like couldn't make myself charge enough basically to get the scale to balance. Like no matter how high I raised the rate or like what I thought was high, it like still was imbalanced. It like this number just wouldn't get big enough. And so on Saturday, I had this like, again, a whole nother layer opening up of like, so what if you weren't trying to value your time? What if you valued like what you're creating, like the value that you're creating? For example, there's a lot of equipment that needs to be purchased in order for there to be a grocery store in this building by the end of it. And we have the option on a lot of it of either somebody like on their side, like the people who are commissioning the project, like either they need to buy the equipment themselves direct from the distributor, or you could have the general contractor do it. But if they do it, they're going to mark up that equipment 10%, 15%, whatever, as part of their overall price. So now you're paying an extra 10% because you had the general contractor buy the equipment. Have me buy the equipment, I'll save you 10% on your purchase of this equipment. That equipment is, $1 million. There's $100,000 that you just saved. And so I added all of that up. I quantified the value of all of the work. And then I took a 60% cut of like if I saved them, let's just say $600,000 on their project. I mean, I would want to leave some of that savings for them. Like, I made this pile of value. You can have this part that I made, and I'll keep the rest of it that I made. And we share it in a way that feels like this. In order for there to be a win win, they get to win and I get to win. And so they get a living benefit of the store. I get a living benefit of walking away debt free. And this kind of thinking to me feels completely revolutionary, completely new territory for anywhere I've ever been before, which is part of why it's so profound that I wanted to talk about it on here because I feel like how it loops back to the Aries new moon that we had on March 21st. And so how it could potentially play out like for this second Aries new moon that we have on April 19th. I feel like going through writing that quote, which was basically what I did in the week after the Aries new moon, the first one. I spent that week writing this bid of I'll do this work, I'll do this effort, and you would pay me X. And going through that process of valuing myself, of looking very closely at what I'm capable of and what I'm not capable of, the parts that are in my control and the parts that aren't in my control, all of the factors of saying yes to this means saying no to a bunch of other things. I weighed a bunch into that process that basically, like, I feel like really pulled the curtain back on like who I am. Like it let me it let me have such a tangible experience with seeing myself and like having a context to be able to see myself in a way that I've never seen before. Like after I went through all of this and was just thinking about like this experience of how transformational even just writing that bid was. Like getting to see myself like that. It was like my self-confidence got upgraded just by having this process of contemplation go on inside of me. And whether they say yes to my proposal or they pass on my proposal and go a different direction, it doesn't even matter as far as like everything that I went through in the last week. I get to keep that. Like the self-confidence that comes from valuing yourself and maybe taking a personal risk and asking for what you're worth, like you get to keep the self-confidence and the self-esteem that comes from that. even if the other person says no to you or whatever, like you still get to know that you respected yourself, you honored yourself, you were fair to you. And if they don't want to co-create with you, that's completely fine. That's kind of beside the point. What was the interaction between you and you? And that's the part where, yeah, writing the quote, especially that very first one where I'm like, see, it's not even worth it. And then the little voice was like, so doesn't that mean you should raise the rate? Like, doesn't that mean you would just need to like, just, okay, so what if you did bring it into balance, like one step at a time, you know? Um, yeah. Oh, this whole Pluto in 0 degrees, caused me to learn a new astrological thing from my life coach that I felt called to share with you right here. So I don't know if you are aware, I definitely was not, of something called the Zenith. The Zenith, I'll type it in the chat just in case. Zenith. Zenith. Um, it is kind of like the midheaven, and it's also a little bit it's even more powerful than the midheaven, but it's a very similar kind of energy. It's at the very top of your chart. Um, and it's always at the very top of your chart. So, what the zenith means is that it is exactly square. It's the point that's exactly square to your rising sign and your descendant. So, your AC and your DC. If you look at that line, right, it's in a set of sister signs. So, like, for example, my rising is 0 degree Taurus and my descendant is 0 degree Scorpio, always exactly opposite from each other. So then you find the point that's square to those 2 points, and that would be 0 degrees of Aquarius. So that is my zenith, and that is where Pluto has stepped onto. And so, anyways, I learned about zeniths because Pluto is so perfectly activating mine. And I would imagine if you're hearing this, there's something activating your zenith. At the top of your chart, exactly square your ascendant. What degree, what sign is that? And see what's there or what might be squaring it, trining it, whatever. Um, it is very like kind of like a destiny point of like what she was saying about the zenith is like, and especially with Pluto on my zenith, it was kind of like the roof under which, like, I think she used the word umbrella. It's like the umbrella under which the whole rest of the chart is happening. And so if you think about it, like the whole rest of the chart, like as a soul, like you can expand, you're growing, but the whole thing is kind of capped by this roof, this zenith. And so basically Pluto coming onto the zenith in my chart, she's like, it's a complete transformation. It's like a phoenixing moment of the roof of your life, of like activations to your zenith. It's like a reconfiguration of what is the top, what is the roof of what your existence is. And so, like, she says Pluto on my zenith is like blowing apart the existing roof so that the expansion can kind of come on through, and the roof is up there somewhere. I don't know, I haven't found it yet, but yeah, I definitely resonate with this point that is square to your rising and descendant axis is like a big deal, a very powerful activation point in your chart. Um, any questions? Any questions that are on your mind that you would like to hear more about? Um, mm, this is also the new moon that is beginning a flip in like the lunar cycle that we've been having these last couple years. um, we've been in a cycle where as the sun moves into a new zodiac sign, first we have the new moon, and then 2 weeks after that, we have the full moon. And with this like double Aries activation, so we have Aries new moon, Libra full moon, and then a second Aries new moon. That is the shifting point, so that next month we have first the Scorpio full moon, which requires the sun to be in Taurus. So first the full moon, and then after that, at the tail end of the sign, instead of the very beginning of the sign, we have the new moon in Taurus. So this flip has a flavor all its own also, of like first seeing like the bigger picture illumination of what you already have, and then kind of like from that more informed standpoint, then going into the new moon and launching a rocket of desire as far as like planting that new seed of what initiation, what further expansion, what next step are you most interested in taking, whatever is coming into place with the new moon energies. Another thing to mention for this specific new moon is that this is our first eclipse of the year. So, eclipses typically happen in the signs where the north and south node of the moon are at that time. And because we are so close to those nodes changing signs, they've been in Taurus Scorpio since January 2022. And in July, here in just a few months, they are moving into the north nodes going to Aries and the south nodes going to Libra. So that was actually one of the things that I wanted to mention, was kind of a timeline that jumped out at me as far as this new moon, because Aries in general is cardinal fire energy. And that is very much associated with new beginnings. Like cardinal fire is like spring, so new life, birth of something new. Aries is very entrepreneurial, very much like risk taking, kind of reminds me of the Fool card. Um, Immature and naive, and I mean that with all the love in the world, as far as like you're willing to take a risk. You're willing to like jump off the cliff and like hope that it works out. Not everybody's like that bold and willing and brave to encounter personal risk, but Aries has kind of an impulsiveness, kind of a fast energy to it that really sets us up to leap into new beginnings. And so, if you resonate with that as far as what happened on your Aries new moon on March 21st, that was the first one. And then we have this Libra full moon, and then we have the second Aries new moon on April 19th, 29 degrees. And that is really, I think, where the true seed is coming in. So, like the first Aries new moon, I said was like a progress check, like a status check. Where are you at on your relationship with yourself and how that relates to other people? Um, and so this one is more like, well, especially where it's also an eclipse, it's more of like a brand new life chapter. Like eclipses, new moons are said to play out for about 6 months, and they culminate with the full moon in that sign later that year. But eclipses aren't just 6 months, they're more like life chapters where maybe this lasts the whole rest of your life, or maybe you meet your spouse, or maybe you start a business that lasts for 30 years. Like those are the kinds of things that can happen on a new moon solar eclipse. Much, much bigger level seeds and resulting fruit than just your average new moon. So that's what we have happening on April 19th, is that solar eclipse, new moon in Aries. And the piece that I really want to point out is, so that's happening at 29 degrees 49 minutes. And if you know how the nodes move, they move retrograde. Everything else is moving forward. Those are the only things that are always like normally moving backwards or retrograde. And so that means when they enter a new sign, they enter at 29 degrees 59 minutes. So almost immediately on July 16th, 2023, that's when the north node is going to be at Aries 29 degrees 49 minutes, where we're about to have this new moon. So basically, how you can think about that is like, April, we're going to have this seed planted, and then in just 3 months, 3 months later in July, the North Node is going to make kind of a slow pass over that seed, kind of like what I imagine, like giving it its blessing, pouring some miracle grow on it, like putting a sun lamp on that thing, like really getting it to go, like at that point. And I point that out because Aries is also like a spark. It's like a right now. And so it can feel really urgent when we do catch a glimpse of what our next chapter is going to be. The thought process might be very normal and natural to think that you're going to just charge right into whatever the new beginning is. And I lay this down as maybe not. Maybe it does take a minute to unfold. Maybe it is something that's so big, it's going to take up the whole rest of your life. So at that point, 3 months ain't nothing. So 3 months after this Aries new moon, we'll have the North Node. I gotta sneeze. Oh, that was really good. We'll have the North Node enter Aries in July, and on July 16th, it'll be at that exact point where the Aries new moon is happening. And then this is again like really nurturing these new beginnings. 6 months later, so January 21st of 2024, we have Pluto re-entering Aquarius. So Pluto actually does quite a dance, quite a routine as it's trying to get into Aquarius. With its retrogrades being like half the year, it enters Aquarius 3 different times, and only on the third time does it like stay for good. It keeps retrograding back into Capricorn for like, here's another few months, here's another few months. And so the final stay will start in November of 2024, but like right now, we're in the first 11 weeks of Pluto in Aquarius, and then we'll be back into Pluto in Capricorn until this January 21st, 2024. And I put that back on there because when we have this Aries new moon that's happening April 19th, Pluto will be in Aquarius. But on June 11th this year, it moves back into Capricorn. I got to sneeze again. Phew, oh my gosh. There's more in there even. It's so itchy on the nose. My grandma says that means somebody's coming. She has like a psychic thing. When her nose itches, it means somebody's coming. So I'm gonna be like looking out. Anyways, so yes, I think like the North Node crossing over where the new moon happens is going to be an activation of sorts. It's like kind of a beginning of an unfolding. Like maybe at that point, the seed has popped a little plant up out of the ground where you can see that this is growing. This is a thing. Maybe a contract gets signed or something like happens that lets you know that this new beginning is concrete. It is underway. And gosh, sorry, I keep itching my nose. It's how dare you? How dare you itch your nose? Thank you, Jody. That was Jody's voice in my head. Appreciate you. But I think with the North Node going over this point in July, like 3 months after the new moon, even though it will be an activation, I don't think it's going to be full steam ahead until Pluto gets back into Aquarius, because that's where Pluto is at the time of the original new moon. I think that energy is very important as far as like really moving forward in this new chapter. And that's not to say that as Pluto did Capricorn these next couple of times, that's like wasted time or anything like that. I think if anything, I'll give you some advice from my story. I'm sitting here thinking like there is one of the biggest reasons that I was so hesitant to quote project in the first place is because it's full time. So full time, what that translates to for me is right now I have this project is one of 4 projects that I'm currently working on. So to work on theirs full time means to say no to this one and say no to this one and extricate myself from this and lean out of this and probably take that part off my website, stop offering those, and like really retract a lot of energy out of a lot of different things so that I have that energy for this. And so that's what I see, these little Pluto and Capricorn, these dips back into that energy, that earth energy, is to continue to purge in your physical life what is not working. That's really what Pluto in Capricorn has been about for the last 15 years. Like I said, Pluto came into Capricorn with some bank failures and it's going out with some bank failures. That's like the easiest summary of what Pluto in Capricorn is all about. It's going to like take the actual system and see, can it hold its own weight, right? Like, is it a sturdy, or is it a Jenga tower where you've taken all the blocks off the bottom just so you can make taller on the top? Is that really what's going on? Because if it is, all you need is just a slight little breeze and your whole tower gets falled over. Versus if it's a solid structure, it's not going anywhere, breeze or no breeze. So Pluto in Capricorn has been stress testing all of the structures in our lives to be like the easiest, in some ways, the easiest parts of Pluto in Capricorn, because what we're getting in these first 11 weeks of Pluto in Aquarius is the first glimpses of how good the new could be, how revolutionary, how like take the ceiling off of anything you've experienced before, self completely expand into, again, nothing you've ever experienced before. And then when Pluto goes back to Capricorn and starts showing you, hey, this friendship isn't ideal, or this thing that is kind of only marginally valuable. Like, it's not even that that they're bad, right? Like they don't have to be bad. They just aren't as good as what could be. And this last like couple jaunts of Pluto and Capricorn to let us answer the question, what do you want in your life? Your time, our time is the most precious resource that any of us have. It doesn't matter for any of us how much money we have in the bank. Our time is the most valuable thing that we have. And so when you think about how you're spending your time, does it bring soul level satisfaction for you? Is it a good deal? Like when you trade your time, like that's all this is, like thinking about quoting this job with these people. It's like, this is a trade. They're going to give me a pile of money and I'm going to give them 2 years of my life. If you had to put a price tag on 2 years of your life, how much would it cost? That's a good exercise to go through. I highly recommend. It's totally free. And by the end of it, give it some time. I think at least for me, it worked out to a massive upgrade in my self-confidence to think about, what price would I trade 2 years of my life for? Like what is that balance point where I think that would be a good trade? Fola that I really want to share here, as I used it in this experience and I think it applies to life in general. She got this advice from like a fellow actor about how to choose what acting gigs you do. And the friend is telling her there's these three criteria. And in order for you to accept a job, the job needs to have at least two of these three criteria. And so the criteria are either you really want to work with these people, that's one. You really want to do this work, like, or this show is how they put it. They're actors, like this role, this movie, this whatever it is. You really want to do this work. And number three is it pays really well. And so you think about it, like how often especially the last 6 years since I became an entrepreneur, almost exclusive with doing the work I want to do, and I haven't worried about the money. I haven't even thought about it. I've been making almost nothing for years because I've been more focused on doing the work I want to do with the people I want to be working with. And so doing it that way has been really good, and it leads back to having to give up so many things. And so, like, is it worth giving all of this up? No. No, it's not, until it starts like, oh, equal value, everybody is winning at the same rate. And that kind of balance and harmony feels really, really good. Feels really good to me. And brings me back to an episode where, like, basically what played in my head on repeat as I was putting together this quote was, you can't get your fair share unless you're willing to take it. like, it can be so tempting to think that, you know, they should want to pay me what I'm worth. They should offer me, this big payday or this big, like, check or whatever because I my skills are so valuable or whatever. And I just I don't know if human behavior really works like that, like, versus I'm gonna keep my resources until somebody comes along and gives me a good reason to part with my resources. Like, I don't think many people go around looking for